Welcome everyone to our October Innovation Forum meeting. Still hard to believe we're already in October and 2025 is around the corner. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. We are joined by Harry Lucas, who is the co-founder of Fazio. So Fazio, just to give a brief overview, is a customer collaboration workspace, and it's really tailored for industrial manufacturing, and it's geared towards enabling manufacturers the time and the capacity to focus on what really matters. And Harry's going to share a bit more about what those three tenets are, and as well as the exciting things that are going on at Fazio. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Harry.
Thanks so much for having me here, guys. As Norm was just saying, my name is Harry, and let's see, there we go. I'm on the next slide now. Good. And I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fazio. My background, you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not American, I'm Australian. I graduated in mechatronics engineering and network security from the University of Adelaide. And I've worked for the European Space Agency and JP Morgan prior to starting Fazio. In relation to those three tenets that Norman was just talking about, we call them the three virtues of manufacturing. So the three virtues of manufacturing at its core, in Fazio's view, the three most important things that you can be focusing time on and spending your time on as a manufacturer. And that is making stuff, building relationships with clients, and educating customers and community about what it is that you do. In many ways, you can abstract this a bit. So you've got making stuff is really operational, and then building client relationships. That's like sales, marketing. Same thing with educating clients, with customers and community. So this is like the three high value activities a manufacturer can be focused on. Some examples of the things that we view as being less valuable that we can help in automating is things like scrolling through emails, trying to recheck requirements because someone's missed a requirement or it got lost in the CRM or something. And now the customers, we're trying to build consensus with the customer about about where a mistake has happened or something. It could be double booking invoices into an accounting system, or it could be fielding checking calls and manual status updates and whatnot. In some ways, it's actually better to describe in the case of the things that are better to be automated than it is these three tenets. I think people generally agree on the importance of these three things, but this sort of condenses it down into some of the things that we can automate for manufacturers. So I want to start by walking through a dream production project. And this dream production project is really, this is a dream for a manufacturer. Everything goes perfectly, right? The customer reaches out to you as a manufacturer with a project in mind, and they include everything in this project. So all of the details around what needs to be manufactured, the materials that are inside of it, super well specced out. And the manufacturer receives this and responds to the request for quote with a really accurate quote that the customer is happy with the price and everything's all good. Customer decides that everything's good, let's send through the purchase order. And they send through the purchase order, production starts. There's no problems with production. The production team understands all of the requirements, right? And then the final product is completed and shipped to the customer, and it arrives and the customer's happy, there's nothing missing, right? And that's the end of it, right? That's how a project should run. Sadly, in practice, it doesn't usually work like this. It usually looks something a bit more like this. So you've got a customer inquiry, they reach out, you respond with an RFQ, and they say, oh my God, it costs so much. Actually, I can just buy the parts from my hardware store or something, commercial off the shelf. Or they realize they want something different. The manufacturer realizes, oh, actually, this project fundamental law of physics, and we need to change everything that you want here. And there's this back and forth circling on RFQ, quote, RFQ, design iteration, quote. And so you've got this back and forth that's happening until you finally get to the point we have a purchase order, right? And so you think, perfect, we're ready and we're good to go. We can start making this thing. But no, the customer changes requirements again at the last minute, and you circle back around to the RFQ stage, and then you get another purchase order, which you then start producing, only to realize that 2 weeks later, there was an email that was lost in the CRM that the sales team forgot to forward to your engineers, and that you've now been producing the wrong part for the customer for the past 3 weeks. The key in this, and this could go on and on, all the way through to, did the parts arrive at the customer's office as we expected them to, right? The key in this is that it's not linear, it's cyclical. And so it's not simply that it starts with the RFQ and goes to the purchase order. It's that these things feed into each other. The customer may not know and understand their requirements. And so you have to increasingly work with them to bring those requirements out. You need to price check them regularly. And so you need to have a cycle of development that you do with the customer. So we kind of group these problems into a few different territories, which we call RFQ hell, revision purgatory, and production pandemonium. And you can see actually just by this grouping where some of the issue is. It's that ideally you'd have all of your revision purgatory before you had RFQ hell. But of course, you have competitors that are also responding to these RFQs. And so you want to qualify this customer and start the conversation with them early. And so you don't actually get the opportunity to have that back and forth before you respond to the RFQ. Hence, you need to have this cyclical process. So let's take a deep breath for a second. This process is full of mayhem. And honestly, I think that the cyclical nature of it is never going to change. But what I think can change is the way in which we handle it from a software standpoint and from a business workflow standpoint. So the process that we advocate for in Fazio is a cyclical handling of the request for quote, design revision, and customer feedback. The idea is that the first version of the project is not necessarily going to be the version that goes into production. It's also, it may not contain, the customer may not have communicated all the requirements. You're sort of trying to get the production requirements to match the project requirements. And eventually you do end up with some requirements, such as like, it could be a CAD file. It could be the kinds of material that you'd like to make this part with. It could be requirements for certain certification standards being applied onto the part. And so all of these requirements then need to be passed through to the production team. So what you have here is the production workflow, right? These are all of the different workstations that are being used to manufacture this part. And on the left, you have this process that we have done to finalize or iterate on the requirements of the project, and then the individual output requirements that have come from the customer. What do I need? And on the right-hand side here, you have your quality management system. So you, of course, have to, you're going to have all of your shall statements inside of your quality management system. So each program that I produce for my CNC shall be version controlled, right? And you've really got your production workflow sandwiched between both of these things, the QMS on one side and the requirements of this specific part on the other. And so you need to have a single system so that the production staff are able to comply with both easily and without needing to, the QMS is often a very long document that it takes time to learn. At the same time, it can be difficult to get the right information to the right people at just the right time on the production floor. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into each of these individual areas, right? So RFQ hell, revision purgatory, and production pandemonium. And we're going to address for each of these, what are some of the ways and the things that we can do to be able to help alleviate some of the issues there. And we're going to start with RFQ hell. So why do we get into RFQ hell? Quoting can be quite slow. It takes time to produce a quote. In some cases, you may even need to do the manufacturing work before you actually, or you may need to do the design work before you actually get to a price on what this is going to cost. It can require the use of many different software packages. And so you've got your CAD software, you might have a pricing spreadsheet, you're going to maybe have separate quoting software that you used, accounting software. There's a lot involved in it. And then probably most importantly, the customer often just misses requirements. Like when they're reaching out on your website or via the phone or by email or something, they're going to highlight the things that excite them or that are important about their project. But they don't necessarily understand the manufacturing constraints of your facility, right? They may know that their project requires an internal pocket inside of the part, but they may be unaware that it's impossible to produce that pocket on a 5-axis or a 3-axis CNC machine. So the first thing that we can do to be able to help with this is automating the quotation process. Now, I want to caveat this by saying that automating the quotation process does not mean that it's like you write a quotation algorithm and that's it. We don't ever touch it again. What it means is this graph here, right? So on small individual orders that are perhaps one-offs, you might just use a pricing spreadsheet a pricing equation to do that, because you just want to get the order in, because then you're getting the customer in, right? In the second group here, you may have business development staff where they are not necessarily manufacturing experts, but they can quote for simple orders. And an algorithmic quoting system can be quite useful for supporting them in being able to quote without pulling engineers off the floor to help them out. And then at the end of the day, there are going to be some orders that you just want to quote manually, right? And they're going to be much larger orders. They're going to be for customers that are super high value for you. And the key point in automated quoting is to basically take all of those smaller jobs that are currently drawing your engineers off the floor, automate as many of them as possible. The next bit is we can apply some of the new generative AI technologies to help pre-vet the project before a customer sees it. And what do I mean by this? It's actually quite practical, and I'm going to show you how it works in a moment. But the idea is that we want to probe the customer for their requirements when they're submitting the project, right? It's not necessarily that AI is going to completely get all of the requirements perfect for you. It's just that sometimes when a customer reaches out, there are some obvious questions that would be really useful for you to know upfront before you start having that detailed conversation with the customer. And we can use some of these new technologies to be able to ask those questions upfront, so that you're spending, you wake up in the morning and that someone has been interacting with this system, and you have a chat history you can look at, and you're like, oh, okay, I understand a bit better what this customer is looking for. So I'm going to show you briefly what this looks like. Firstly, starting with the quotations, and then going into the chatbot. So let me I think you guys should be able to see this screen now. So the first thing for quotations is, so Fazio basically provides a quotation system where you can upload a file and immediately get a price out of it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to pick a file here that I have, just something I've got on my machine. When I upload it here, I get a price immediately. And at this point, I'm able to configure the various, so for instance, if I want to have it priced in like CNC using stainless steel, I can configure this here, and I can get the overall cost for manufacturing this part. And what you can see is that we are also running manufacturability checks on this thing to flag for the operator the walls are too thin to manufacture on this part or anything. So the idea is that this is based on an algorithm that is configurable by the manufacturer. And so we have an internal scripting system wherein you're able to basically get one of your engineers to start writing up a short equation, basically, which does generic pricing on geometries that are uploaded. And then these parts are this equation can be iterated on and improved over time, so that you can deal with more and more edge cases. And it eventually becomes a useful piece of IP if you're figuring out how to price parts using an equation, right? The second thing here is that we have this AI function here. So for example, what's the recommended process for manufacturing this part? And you can see that this system is going to ask probing questions about what's the function of the part, what is the environment it will be used in, right? This part is a propeller for an outboard motor. So let's just put that in here. This is a propeller for an outboard motor. And this system is going to continuously ask me more and more probing questions, while at the same time making suggestions on the different manufacturing processes that may be useful for manufacturing this thing. So in this case, it's recommending something like CNC because, yeah, it's only going to offer the things that are available set up inside of this storefront right now. But CNC is natural for something like an outboard motor. So in this case, it's asking, could we specify if we have a preference for any of these options based on the potential environmental requirements? So let's say it needs to be in service for 10 years, let's say. Just some random requirement, right? And you can see that it's going to make a recommendation again based on these new requirements. So this system isn't a person, right? And you can't necessarily trust this to do, it's not going to close the deal for you, but this entire chat history is going to be available to you as a manufacturer, right? The idea being that you can then go in and review this when you see this request, and you're able to then look at the conversation they had. And it's probably quite useful to know that, oh, okay, they need a boat propeller that's going to be in service for 10 years, right? That's information that likely wouldn't have been provided up front. And this is the idea that we're trying to poll the customer for these sorts of queries.
Hey, Harry,
Yep.
the pricing algorithm based off of geometry, I find that very interesting. Could you unpack that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. Phasio provides essentially a pricing engine wherein we've got a CAD engine in our system that exposes different variables from the CAD engine. So essentially, when a file is uploaded here, I'll actually just show you it. So this is the price this is the equation I wrote for the price that you just saw. So if I go into the technology here, I've got my CNC manufacturing 5-axis, and we have an equation here that governs the price of it. This is obviously a really dumb equation, so you wouldn't use this one in practice. However, you've got a heap of different variables here, whether it's the convex hull volume, the area, the width, the height, the length, the quantity, the infill, bounding box volume, whatever. The system has syntax highlighting. You can define sub-equations if you want to. The idea is that it's supposed to be a tool set that you can give to an engineer, and they're going to be able to go in and understand, they're going to be able to go in and use their experience and put that into an equation, which will then be completely customized to your business and can be used for providing automated quotations. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you.
Fascinating stuff. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's behind the AI? You've got some large language model there. I'm curious how you've educated that, where it's going. It must be a growing thing. And then I've been using Copilot in my business a lot, and I'll often go to ChatGPT to ask it to write something for me. Then I'll take it over to Copilot and ask it to customize it to me, because it's looking at all my emails and all my data and all my documents, and it'll reference some document from 2 years ago. Hey, you and Matt built this document together, and it applies here. What kind of plans do you have around that kind of sophistication?
Yeah, so at the moment, the way that system works is it's drawn from we draw data from the data sheets. So for instance, if you manufacture using stainless from a certain company or something, you basically provide the data sheet to us, and we're gonna then, it's tailored to what you offer as a manufacturer. So it's drawn all from there. In the long run, just going back to this here, our goal is to basically augment this entire loop with the AI system. So we want it to be at the point where if a customer sends you a message, then the system should be able to look at the existing requirements document and then look at this message and then say, oh, hey, it looks like this is a substantive change in the requirements document. So I'm going to flag that. And then we'll have someone review this project to see if we need to cancel production or change the costing or something like that. The idea being that there's a lot of sort of documents involved in this process, and if we can have the AI review for the realisticness of a new requirements change, then we can save a lot of time and headache. Okay, great. Would love to have a conversation about some of the way you've been using Copilot as well, because we're actively evolving a lot of this at the moment.
I feel like I'm getting so much out of it, but there's just so much more there. It's quite an effort.
Yep. So that actually feeds quite nicely into this next section, which is what we call revision purgatory. So as I alluded to earlier, manufacturing requirements and product requirements are often completely different. A customer usually has a pretty good understanding of their product requirements, but they often don't have an understanding of the manufacturing requirements. They expect that of the manufacturer, that they're gonna come in and say, they're gonna highlight, oh, if you optimize this geometry a little here, then I can probably make this considerably cheaper. Or it may simply be that it's an impossible design and it can't work with that manufacturing technology. There's also the fact that customers are like reaching out through all sorts of different channels. They're calling you, they're emailing you, they're texting you. It's very easy to lose track of requirements, right? So you've got your CRM, which is usually your salespeople. The CRM kind of, there's a lot of information that gets put in there, but that often doesn't propagate into your PLM or wherever else you're keeping requirements. It's very easy for the sales team to just simply forget to forward an email, or someone receives a text or something asking about a change and it just doesn't make it into the PRD document. And then I think one of the key issues is that most ERPs and most manufacturing software in general doesn't support revisions. So it usually expects that when the order goes into the system, that's it, it's done, and it's finished, which can present some real issues if you then are getting a lot of change requests further down the production process. So the way that I'll give you guys another brief view on the way that we try and tackle this issue. This screen is like this is a customer dashboard. So this screen is the, basically every customer that you have would receive a private dashboard where they can see their orders and quotes and that sort of stuff. The important part I want to focus on here is the project section, right? So I've got a custom boat propeller for a company called Aquatic Systems, which I just invented. And you can see that they've basically reached out in relation, they're a company from Vancouver, BC. They develop high performance boat propellers, which utilize vortex technology. I'm not sure what that is, but they use that to improve energy efficiency of standard outboard motors on small vessels. And so they're prototyping a new design that they hope to market test in April. And after the prototyping phase, they hope to carry out 100 short batch manufacturing for the first 100 customers. So this is basically a project that is created between you as the manufacturer and your customer. And the idea is that it contains quotes and orders, notably multiple quotes and orders, because so often a project starts with a prototyping run and then turns into a short batch or turns into a long batch. And it's very important that we maintain the context as that project evolves over time. We have file exchange, which is obviously, a lot of people use Dropbox for this sort of stuff. And this is just, you can exchange sort of any files through this. Everything is encrypted when it's uploaded. And then we have a chat interface here where you have the back and forth communication between the manufacturer and the customer. Notably, this is all multi-channel. So whether they are emailing you, whether they're chatting in this interface, it doesn't matter. It's all going to show up in this interface for you. So you're not having to go into all of these different locations to try and track where some message was sent or something. Key thing I want to focus on here is that we have designs as a part of this. So there's this thing called Vortex Extreme. Let's go ahead and open that up. And we see we have multiple design iterations for the Vortex Extreme. And there have been tags placed onto this file. So it's, oh, look, I know the walls are getting thin up here. Can your machine produce this? Or the blade thickness needs to be at least 4 millimeters, right? So if I had a query about this, because I'm logged in as the customer right now, right? If I had a query about this, I'd say, I can just right click this. I say, can you make this less pointy? And that comment is just going to be dropped onto the part here. And then as the manufacturer, you're going to be able to see what the customer's talking about when they leave their comment there. It's that we want to make it so that you can discuss in the context of the actual 3D geometry. You see it on the screen in front of you, rather than needing to discuss everything, have a 15-minute phone call explaining the part you need. Instead, you can just tag it on this part. That serves a dual purpose, which is that you can firstly build consensus with your customer faster, but also it makes the audit trail much nicer, because you can really point to, if you want to look at this, if you look at this chat history, you're going to see, if you look in a year's time, you're going to see really exactly what people were talking about at every stage of the design iteration process. And Dave, when I mentioned before about like using AI in the requirements process, this is really what I meant, which is that by having this as a multi-channel interface, right? So that you've got the emails coming in, SMS coming in, all of this stuff. This forms the foundation of what will become a requirements document. And then that can be used to then, we can apply AI in ensuring that that document evolves automatically over time.
Question, Harry, but you just got my brain spinning on all the potential behind this, right? I'm sorry, it's fascinating what you're doing. And there's so many instances of people bringing AI into what they're doing and making it smarter. It's like just the cusp of something really wonderful. This is cool.
Excellent, glad you like it. Yeah, so let me just switch back to the slideshow. So this is the sort of the final section, which is production pandemonium. Why do we get into the production pandemonium? Well, it's because the QMS is often a written document which needs to be interpreted. It contains a bunch of shall statements, right? And those shall statements need to be interpreted by the people who are working on the production floor. Also, so that's we call it the production sandwich. On one side, you've got the QMS, right? And you've got the workstations that are the middle of the sandwich, right? And on the other side, you have the part requirements. So the workstations and the production process is sandwiched by the QMS and the part requirements. And the production staff are in a difficult spot because the QMS is a written document that takes time to interpret. And on the other hand, the production staff often don't have the full context of the part which they're about to be manufacturing. And if they're pumping through like hundreds of parts a day, they're spending more time looking up requirements then they are actually they've got to do QC on this part, right? So they pull up the part in front of them, and then they need to go and check the 2D drawing to see if the circularity, if there's a tolerance on the circularity of one of the diameters on the part. And it's going to take them more time to pull up that document than it is for them to actually do the test. And unfortunately, there's so many of these things that need to be done that oftentimes it's an intuitive game. You can flag a part as being like, oh, this is a critical part. We've got to be really careful with this part. But it's not necessarily that there's a systematic approach to ensuring that there's checkpoints. There's checkpoints at every point of the production process. I think the last thing here is that there's often limited visibility on workstation activities. You can't necessarily audit and look back and say, oh, on the QC station that day, we had Harry, and Harry messed up one of these. He didn't properly check the quality of this part or something. It's no easy way for us to look back and see, are there any other affected parts? Do we need to see if Harry also mixed up something else, right? So auditability is a real issue there. Now, I would love to show you guys a demo, something like this, but I don't so much have this. We could go deep on that. Something we're still evolving on, and we're still improving inside of our platform. But yeah, we essentially have a workflow management system inside of Fazio that we're trying to feed the PRD and requirements documents into.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, this has been an amazing look at maybe the inside baseball, so to speak, of manufacturing. And that is, it seems like that there's so many different people or parts or departments involved in this whole process. There's the sales department, there's the engineering department, the customer has their CAD drawing. And so it seems like what you've illustrated is that it tends to be a reactionary process all the way through, and nobody fixes it because the salesperson sees his part, but he doesn't always feel the pain of the engineers. And the engineers, they don't always see maybe the confusion or reaction going back and forth between the salesperson and the customer. So it's a situation where there's so many people involved. And you mentioned that sandwich idea that now we have operational parts in the QMS system, and we've got the work requirements. There's so many moving parts in this thing that unfortunately, if we don't get control of it, we end up in a very reactionary mode of putting out fires all the time rather than having a relatively flow process. I'm just curious, who hurt you so bad that you figured out a solution for this?
I actually, to be honest with you, it's that Fazio really started doing a lot more of the quoting side of things. And we very quickly realized that you can't do quoting without requirements, because quoting is a requirement. The cost is a part of the requirements. And then when we got into that, we realized that it's okay, there's all of this mayhem kind of propagates downstream. And so if you can really nail the requirements, then you can, to some extent, bring order to that chaos. Yeah, I spent quite a lot of time at manufacturing facilities. I've been blown away by it.
Yeah. This is really an amazing solution. And like Dave said, it's really got my mind spinning in terms of the opportunity to not let that mayhem flow downstream, right? To solve it at the very front. But we were touring a manufacturer, the box maker, which was an amazing experience. They talked about something you're offering here, and that is they went from everything being a customized quote to a automated quoting system. But I think that's very difficult for a lot of manufacturers because that took them a lot of time. They had to hire programmers. There was maybe years in the development of that. And it seems like you're offering somebody a relatively easy solution for automatic quoting. Am I wrong about that?
No, that's exactly what we do. That's exactly it. So it's usually, there can be a little bit of back and forth. Sometimes we help out with some of the algorithmics in the beginning, but yeah, the idea is basically to try and just take the weight of some of those smaller orders away so that the team can be focused on the really high value orders that come through.
And I'll just mention one more thing is it seems like that this process, the fact that maybe me as a customer could interact with an AI to work out these requirements, and the AI could tell me those walls are too thin or the machines can't do something like this. The fact that I could have that conversation with an AI just seems like with people, it's really hard because we get distracted. We have 100 things to do on our desk. We don't get back to that call for 2 weeks. But this kind of shortens the whole the whole time frame for the customer. Is that part of your vision as well?
Yeah, I think from the AI, from the perspective of what we're doing with the AI, the goal is to move the customer through the pre-qualification phase as fast as possible, so that you're eliminating all of the sort of those initial. A lot of manufacturers have the same questions that they're asking to customers when they first come in, and we want to basically make it so that by the time you see the request from the customer, they've already answered those questions for you, and you can have a pretty good idea of what this project is going to look like.
Wow. So at what point would, if your system is doing the quoting, at what point would this go to, say, engineering or production? I'm just imagining the process is much faster, a lot smoother.
Yeah. So you still have the same sort of sales process of going through like your B2B ordering flow and that sort of stuff. The main point at which you usually have to pull engineers into it is, so Fazio is designed to box out simple quotes. So the idea is that simple quotes can be done in an automated manner, but once it becomes too complicated, it should be escalated to an engineer. And we have controls to enable you to do that, whether it's based on the order quantity, whether it's based on the order value. The system simply will create a project and flag that with the engineer when that is the case, rather than enabling them to actually just go through the entire quote process.
Is there going to be, and sorry to dominate all the questions, I hope other people have questions, but is there going to be a connection to an ERP system at some point where maybe this order is also scheduled at the same time? I'm trying to picture the workflow, but if the customer, if it could say, this is your product, this is your price, and this is your estimated delivery time, that would be crazy.
Yeah, we already have integrations with the ERP systems. We integrate with, there's of course a heap of different accounting systems, but we've got, when people onboard, and we've got a few customers in fact already that are using large ERP systems that we're integrated with.
Okay.
So that's standard practice for us.
Standard practice. Okay. Wow. Thank you.
I've only got a couple of slides left, but yeah, in all, why does this all matter? And the reason is, firstly, trust is really profitable in manufacturers. Honeywell, for example, or any other large manufacturing company, they're not necessarily just going to immediately decide that this is the small manufacturer for them and that they're going to work with them forever. It's becoming a preferred partner of these large companies is often the best way for you to build a relationship and start to get deal flow from them, start to get repeat orders. And in order to deliver on that trust, you've got to have a consistent production process, a consistent quoting process. You have to be reliable, right? And so by adding order into the internal project and production process, we hope to make our manufacturers we add stability into their internal process, and ultimately give them the ability to be more consistent in their quoting and production timelines. Something else that's important here, which often can be a tricky one, is sometimes customers have to be held accountable to the requirements that they do set, because there are plenty of times where customers set either unrealistic requirements, or they think they've set requirements in a certain way when they actually haven't. And we need to be able to go back and say, actually, that's not what you said. We may still make it for you, and we may still do the change at no cost for you, but it needs to be clear why requirements took effect. That's all a part of being reliable. So key takeaways from this: the project and starting phase, the starting phases of a new project with a customer is cyclical. But most manufacturing software is ignoring it. And by applying AI, and automated quotations, we're able to reduce the cycle time so that you can do more iterations more quickly. And it's not enough to simply generate a requirements document. Requirements should extend and expand the QMS. We should be sandwiching the production process between the QMS and the product requirements, and ultimately ensuring that the people on the production floor are well supported in producing an end product for the customer, which meets their requirements and turns them into a repeat customer.
That's great, Harry. Staying with customer requirements, could you go back one slide?
Sure.
That third bullet really spoke to me. Oftentimes when I work with clients, and scope creep is definitely real with their customers. Have you come across any tips or tricks on how to subtly drive that home and hold customers accountable?
For us, it's just all in the audit trail. We've had customers reach out to us, saying that the audit trail inside of Fazio saved them on projects, because they were able to point to a certain conversation where it might have been as simple as a misinterpretation, right? Where the customer said one thing, but it was interpreted in another way. If you have something to point to, because you obviously don't want to burn the relationship, right? And so you don't just want to go back saying, you didn't say that. But if you can point to it and you can say, actually, that was not what we agreed, you can see here, then it gives you a diplomatic way to approach that. That's been the biggest win we found.
That's great. And it really all revolves around that trust, that what you have in that first bullet there. So that's fantastic. I think just to echo Kirk and Dave, my mind is spinning as well. A lot of exciting things. And I think we're all feeling it, right? When we talk about innovation and how quickly things are evolving and the advancements that we're experiencing. I as well, using Copilot and ChatGPT, it's almost like data overload and information overload. So I definitely appreciate you, Harry, for coming in and sharing a bit more behind the scenes on your solution and how you're leveraging innovation to help your customers.